The atmosphere in Nigeria's political space became tense after U.S. Congressman Riley Moore publicly warned President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to release Nnamdi Kanu or face multiple sanctions. The message from Washington had caused shockwaves in Abuja, sparking private discussions at every level of government. For a few days, the presidency remained silent, watching the reactions grow both locally and internationally. But silence could not last forever. The long-awaited response finally came. President Tinubu sent a direct message to the United States and the international community. The words were calm, measured, but firm. The statement read, "Nigeria is a sovereign nation. We will not be intimidated or pressured by any foreign body or lawmaker. The matter concerning Nnamdi Kanu remains an internal legal issue, governed by the laws of our nation." Those words immediately captured attention across Africa. It was clear that Tinubu had decided not to bow to external pressure. He was drawing a line, reminding the world that Nigeria has its own system of justice and its own rules of governance. But his tone also reflected a sense of pride, the kind that shows a leader who feels his country's image is being challenged. Behind the scenes, reports suggested that the statement was carefully crafted after several security and diplomatic meetings at the presidential villa. Sources said the president's advisors debated whether to respond directly or maintain silence. Some argued that ignoring Riley Moore would make Nigeria appear weak. Others feared that an aggressive response could worsen diplomatic relations with Washington. In the end, Tinubu chose a middle path, firm but respectful. The message emphasized that Nigeria's government respects international partnerships but cannot accept interference in its judicial process. It pointed out that the Nigerian courts are independent and capable of handling any matter involving its citizens. It also reminded foreign leaders that every country, including the United States, guards its legal sovereignty. However, Tinubu's response did not come without mixed reactions. Supporters of the president praised him for standing his ground, calling it a demonstration of strength and independence. They said Nigeria must not appear as a country that can be dictated to by outsiders. One senior government official even described Riley Moore's warning as a form of diplomatic bullying that no serious nation should entertain. On the other hand, critics saw the statement differently. They said the president missed a chance to show leadership by addressing the deeper issue, the repeated court orders demanding Nnamdi Kanu's release. According to them, hiding behind sovereignty only deepens international suspicion about Nigeria's respect for human rights. Political analysts say Tinubu's words were carefully chosen to balance two goals, maintaining national pride and managing diplomatic damage. The presidency understands that a direct confrontation with the United States could hurt Nigeria's economy and foreign relations, but at the same time, Tinubu cannot be seen as bowing to pressure. That delicate balance is now at the heart of Nigeria's political drama. Shortly after the statement was released, global media networks picked it up. Major newspapers in Washington, London, and Johannesburg carried headlines such as "Tinubu defies U.S. pressure and Nigeria pushes back against American warning." Diplomatic circles in New York and Brussels began to discuss what this defiance might mean for future cooperation. Within Nigeria, the conversation became even louder. Civil society groups demanded that the president take human rights more seriously, reminding him that sovereignty should never be used as a shield for injustice. In contrast, loyalists of the ruling party defended him, saying Nigeria must protect its dignity from foreign interference. By afternoon, the Nigerian Senate held a private session where some lawmakers expressed concern that the U.S. warning might affect future military and trade support. But others said Nigeria should remain firm and refuse any external dictate. The debate highlighted how divided the country's leadership had become over the issue. Tinubu's statement also addressed another key point: national unity. He reminded Nigerians that the government's actions were not directed against any ethnic group or region but were based on national security concerns. He said Nigeria's unity remains non-negotiable and that no one is above the law, no matter how popular or powerful. Still, many Nigerians believe that this latest exchange between Abuja and Washington could either open the door for diplomatic dialogue or deepen the rift between the two nations. Some diplomats are quietly urging both sides to find a peaceful resolution through back-channel talks before things escalate into a full-blown diplomatic standoff. For now, Tinubu's message has drawn the world's attention once again to Nnamdi Kanu's case, and to the broader question of how far Nigeria is willing to go to defend its sovereignty in the face of international criticism. The president's words were clear: Nigeria will make its own decisions. But whether that decision strengthens the country's image or isolates it from its global partners remains to be seen. The stage is now set for the next move, and all eyes are on Washington to see how America responds to Nigeria's defiance. The response from Washington came faster than anyone expected. Barely 48 hours after President Tinubu's statement declaring that Nigeria will not be intimidated, voices from Capitol Hill began to speak again, and this time, they sounded even more serious. Representative Riley Moore, the man who started the diplomatic storm, returned to the spotlight with another firm message. Standing before reporters in Washington, he said, "Respecting sovereignty does not mean ignoring injustice. Nigeria cannot hide behind sovereignty while breaking its own laws. This is not about interference, it is about accountability." His words carried weight. They were not just the opinion of one congressman. They echoed the growing frustration among U.S. lawmakers who believe Nigeria's government has failed to respect court orders. Moore also revealed that discussions were already ongoing in the House Foreign Affairs Committee about possible human rights sanctions targeting certain Nigerian officials. Within hours, major U.S. news outlets began to broadcast his remarks. CNN, Fox News, and The Washington Post all ran stories questioning whether the Biden administration might soon take a position on the matter. Analysts on American television debated how far the U.S. should go in pressuring Nigeria, given its importance as a regional power in Africa. The U.S. State Department did not immediately confirm any new sanctions, but a senior official, speaking anonymously, said the situation was being reviewed closely. He added that the United States continues to encourage Nigeria to uphold the rule of law and maintain democratic principles. Diplomatically, this was a polite way of saying that Washington is watching closely and waiting for Tinubu's next move. In Nigeria, this reaction reignited tension. Many citizens who had celebrated the president's statement now began to worry that the standoff could lead to economic consequences. Nigeria depends on strong relations with the United States for trade, military support, and international aid. If those ties weaken, the effects could spread through the economy. Some Nigerian commentators argued that the U.S. was overstepping its boundaries, claiming that no foreign country should dictate to Nigeria how to handle its internal issues. Others countered that this was not about control but about respect for justice. They pointed out that Nnamdi Kanu's case has already been decided in Nigerian courts and that the government's refusal to obey court orders gives the U.S. moral grounds to speak. In Washington, the issue quickly turned into a larger conversation about Africa's future and America's role on the continent. Several U.S. lawmakers said Nigeria's handling of this situation would affect its credibility as a democratic leader in Africa. One senator remarked, "Nigeria cannot demand global respect while ignoring justice at home." Meanwhile, behind closed doors, diplomatic efforts continued. U.S. officials reportedly reached out to Nigeria's ambassador in Washington for a private discussion. The message was clear: America is not trying to undermine Nigeria, but it will not ignore human rights violations. Across the Atlantic, African analysts observed the growing tension with concern. They noted that a diplomatic clash between Washington and Abuja could divide regional alliances and weaken Africa's collective voice on international matters. Some even warned that prolonged conflict might push Nigeria closer to nations like China or Russia, creating new global power dynamics. For President Tinubu, this pressure is a serious test of leadership. His decision to stand firm may boost his image among those who value sovereignty, but it could also cost Nigeria valuable diplomatic partnerships if the situation worsens. The economic implications are already being discussed in policy circles. Some American investors are said to be watching the situation before committing to new projects in Nigeria. Human rights groups have also begun sending petitions to the U.S. government, urging them to act faster and hold Nigerian officials accountable. In response, Nigerian officials tried to calm the situation. A brief statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that Nigeria remains open to diplomatic dialogue with all nations but will not tolerate what it described as external pressure disguised as friendship. Despite these words, observers believe the relationship between Nigeria and the United States has entered a delicate phase. If the issue of Nnamdi Kanu is not resolved soon, it could grow into a full-scale diplomatic crisis. By the end of the week, Riley Moore made another comment online. He wrote, "This is not about power. It's about doing what's right. The people of Nigeria deserve justice and truth." His words captured global attention once again, proving that the matter is far from over. The question now is how far the United States is willing to go. Will Washington push for sanctions, or will quiet diplomacy prevail? And how long can Tinubu maintain his defiance before economic and political pressure begins to bite? The tension between Abuja and Washington is now more than a war of words. It is a test of principles, pride, and power. As the standoff between Washington and Abuja deepened, reactions began to spread across Africa. The continent was quietly watching how Nigeria, often seen as the giant of Africa, would handle one of its most intense diplomatic challenges in recent years. Within days, leaders, ministers, and commentators from different African countries began to speak out, and their opinions revealed a clear divide. Some African nations sided with President Tinubu, saying Nigeria had every right to defend its sovereignty and manage its legal affairs without foreign intrusion. Others, however, felt that Tinubu's firm stance could isolate Nigeria from its allies and worsen tensions with the West. The continent was suddenly split between those calling for defiance and those urging diplomacy. In Ghana, political observers reminded the world that stability in Nigeria affects the entire region. Ghana's former president, John Mahama, was among those who publicly urged calm. In a brief statement, he said Africa's strength lies in dialogue, not confrontation. He encouraged both the Nigerian and U.S. governments to find common ground through diplomacy. His words were seen as an effort to prevent a political storm that could destabilize the region's peace and economic partnerships. Meanwhile, in South Africa, several political figures expressed concern that Washington's approach might set a bad precedent for the continent. They warned that if powerful nations could threaten sanctions against African governments over internal matters, other countries could face similar pressure in the future. To them, Nigeria's defiance was not just a national issue, it was a test of Africa's independence on the global stage. But in Kenya, the response was different. Several human rights groups and civil society organizations openly supported Riley Moore's call, insisting that African governments must be accountable for justice and human rights. They said defending sovereignty should not mean silencing truth. They called on Nigeria to respect its own court rulings and release Nnamdi Kanu without delay. Within the African Union, the situation became a topic of quiet discussion. Diplomats working behind the scenes said the AU was trying to prevent the issue from escalating into a full diplomatic confrontation. The organization's leadership understands how critical Nigeria is to Africa's economy and politics. They worry that any sanctions or international fallout could weaken the continent's bargaining power in global affairs. Back in Abuja, President Tinubu's advisors were divided. Some argued that the government should double down and make it clear that no external power could dictate to Nigeria. Others urged the president to soften his tone and open a direct communication channel with Washington before matters spiral out of control. Tinubu, according to sources, listened carefully but remained calm. He reportedly said Nigeria would not trade its dignity for comfort. That statement, though made privately, began circulating among top government officials and was later quoted by political commentators across Nigerian media. It reinforced the image of a leader who sees himself standing firm under global pressure. Supporters saw him as a patriot defending the nation's pride. Critics called it a dangerous gamble that could backfire. At the same time, ECOWAS leaders were quietly observing. Several West African presidents reportedly spoke with Tinubu privately, advising him to seek a diplomatic path. Some feared that if Nigeria faced sanctions or economic restrictions, it would have a ripple effect across the entire region. Nigeria's influence within ECOWAS is too large to ignore. Any crisis there could affect trade, migration, and regional stability. International financial experts also started analyzing the risk. If U.S. sanctions were imposed, Nigeria's economy could suffer, especially in areas linked to foreign investment and international banking. The naira could face more pressure, and global partners might hesitate to engage until clarity returns. But through all the warnings and diplomatic whispers, Tinubu remained unmoved in public. He maintained his stand that Nigeria would decide its path and that no amount of pressure would change that. He also called on Nigerians to remain united and to trust that their country's sovereignty would not be sold for convenience. By the end of the week, the African media was filled with discussions about what this standoff truly meant. Was it a clash of values, sovereignty versus justice, or a sign of deeper political struggles shaping the continent's future? As night fell over Abuja, one thing became clear: this was no longer just a story about Nnamdi Kanu or Riley Moore. It had grown into a question of Africa's position in the modern world, how much independence its nations truly have when confronted by the power of global politics. For now, Tinubu's message remains unchanged: Nigeria will not be intimidated. But as the days unfold, the continent and the world wait to see whether this firmness becomes a victory for sovereignty or a costly test of pride.